I was recently watching Gage's video titled Words of Advice. It's a fantastic video that I'll link in the description made about Suicide Awareness Month. I thought now would be a good time to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while. It's something I feel hits home personally. In 2022, the national statistics of recorded suicides in the United Kingdom was 5,500 cases to 6,500 cases, depending on the source of the statistics. I honestly think that this number would be higher if it weren't for another problem. I was about 18 the first time I taught someone about suicide. I taught them over social media long into the night, and I wouldn't go to sleep until I was sure that they were okay. That wasn't the last time I've had to stay up until 3 a.m. because the consequence of which would be waking up to a world with one less friend in it. I've lost count of how many nights I've stayed up, sometimes seeing the sun come up in the morning by the time I'm in a position in which I feel I can end the conversation knowing that the other person is safe. One night I woke up at 3 a.m. in a scenario that was almost prophetic. If I was religious, I'd chalk it down to that, but I'm not, so I don't know. I woke up at 3 a.m. randomly, checked my phone, and was immediately greeted with my friend's suicide note. And I was very quick to get their attention and to talk to them in private messages. Me randomly waking up at 3 a.m. one night in the middle of summer is a major contributor as to why that person is still alive and among us. 18-year-olds, children, shouldn't have to do this to keep their friends. People with no experience who aren't qualified or prepared should not be the first line for suicide prevention. But you will not find anyone in our current society or climate who is as dedicated as the friends of these people. Kids shouldn't have to tell other kids that life is worth living, and they shouldn't have to sacrifice their own health and well-being and time in order to convince each other of that. Kids who are studying or starting their first jobs should not be staying up all night making sure that they don't lose friends. You getting a full night's sleep should not be at the expense of somebody's life. And yet, that is a position that people are put in constantly. I'd like to say that people over 18 now will be the last generation of people to go through this, but we all know that is not true. Sadly, with a combined attitude of our elders who don't seem to think that things exist if they're on a screen, and a complete lack of interest in this topic from government, healthcare institutions, and people who have the power to do something, this problem isn't going away. It's almost comical that these are the same people who tell us that we're not experienced or qualified enough to operate a till in a supermarket when we look for jobs, and yet we're the reason that a lot of you have never had to sponge your kids' blood out of the carpet. There's an endless pit of money for all kinds of frivolity, but we apparently don't have enough to set up any form of literal lifeline for people inches away from death, because our kids can pick up the slack. We could, with the right resources and attention to detail, you could, in theory, set up some sort of 911 alternative where people who are having such thoughts could reach out, and they do provide something better than just sending cops to arrest you. There could be someone on the other end who is a professional, who has the structure necessary to deal with the consequence of failure, who is actually prepared and has had training and knows what they're doing and is prepared to take that call instead of just randomly waking up at 3 a.m. and checking their phone. Instead, we're more than happy for inexperienced children to play trial and error because there's literally nothing else that they can do. There's no other avenue for them to turn to that's reliable. Bearing in mind, when you reach out to professionals, there's a very real chance you don't hear anything back. There's a real chance that parents will not pay for you to see someone because it costs too much. I have friends in America who were literally losing their minds, and their parents didn't have the money to put them through therapy and also just didn't want the stigma attached to it. The entire solution to this problem, as of right now, hinges on charities and volunteers. We can't even use the word suicide because of the aforementioned stigma at this point, because algorithms are designed to bury it, because we don't want to remind people who can do something about it that they probably should have done something about it by now. I know that I'm not the only person with these kinds of stories, and I'm hoping that people who weren't aware that they weren't alone in it realize that they're not alone in it. Maybe, hopefully, other people will start talking about it. But I know that I'm not the only person with these kinds of stories, and I'm not in a position where I can breathe a sigh of relief and just say, nobody after me will have to go through that. You know, like the people who went through World War II, or the people who went through the miners' strikes or power cuts or anything like that. I can't say, no, the next generation won't have this problem. I think the next generation will have a worse problem, if I'm being honest, if I had to predict. And I think that given how unwilling we are to put money into infrastructure and to fix our societal problems, yeah, we are going to have this problem for the next batch of children. And it's yet another reason why having children is such an unattractive prospect, because this is the world you're bringing them into. This is the future you hold and give to them knowingly now. My parents didn't know that this was coming, but I do. I just really wish that I was not able to make anything like this, talk about this kind of thing, and just be this honest about it, and say such awful things. But unfortunately, that is just the world that we are stuck with.